Hey y'all, welcome to my basement studio. Alright, so we're going to be doing Sgraffito today, which is one of my all-time favorite surface decorating techniques. And we're going to use black slip for it, which is on the counter already for you. And black is super nice because when we scratch away, we'll see the white clay, which shows really nice contrast against our white clay. All right, so first thing you want to do is make sure that the slip is mixed up. There is a whisk and a spatula that are on the counter that you can use to stir that up and mix it into a nice consistency. And then I like to use one of the soft bristle brushes to apply the slip. So obviously we're going to start with, you're going to make your form first, and you're going to perfect it and have it look exactly the way that you want it to before we start the actual surface decorating technique. I happen to be doing a tile for an example, but you're making a vessel. Remember, a container to hold something. So I also like to, in between the wear board and your work, I like to put down like a piece of newspaper or paper towel or something, just so that we don't get a bunch of colored slip on the board that then we have to clean up later. Please, whatever you do, do not use the colored slip on the canvas covered boards, okay? Because we don't want that to get into the clay and then have it be permanently fired in there. All right, so you can go ahead and we're gonna brush on our first coat and, you know, kind of make sure we cover the entire area. You could do inside and outside of your vessel, whatever your preference is, you know, sides, that whole thing. And then we needed to kind of set up a little bit in between layers or coats, because if you can see, like if I just keep brushing with this, you might notice how you can see some of the clay kind of shining through a little bit. And so it helps if we let the slip set up, get a little bit leather hard. And again, you can do this in the room by either hitting it with the blow dryer real quick or putting it underneath the heat lamp for a couple of minutes, basically until you can press it and not leave, you know, like a fingerprint or a smudge like that. Okay. All right, so when the first coat is dry, we're going to go ahead and apply a second coat or a second layer. And for this, you're going to want to go in the opposite direction that you applied your first coat. And what this is going to do is going to help you get a really nice, even covering. We're not going to end up with any streaks or anything like that. I had a little bit of a snafu when I was trying to dry mine with a fan, and I knocked the fan over and kind of messed it up, but whatever. That's it, right? Make sure to get those sides. Don't worry about those kind of little chunks. You know, we make the slip ourselves with some different clay ingredients and water and some black pigment. And so those are just some of the ingredients that didn't get completely mixed up. Once we fire them and put the clear glaze on it, it'll all kind of like melt away. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and let this, you know, dry again. Again, I can put it under the heat lamp. I can use the blow dryer for, you know, a few minutes. Again, until there's like no more like sheen, you know, shine going on here. And it's almost dry, but not completely dry. All right, so once the slip is dry, but the whole thing is not bone dry, it's time to start kind of mapping out where you're going to scratch away. If you feel comfortable with your drawing skills, feel free to just, you know, go in with either like a ballpoint pen or, you know, maybe a number 2 pencil and draw the outlines or the contour lines of your design that you're going to do. But a lot of people aren't as comfortable with drawing. And so this is why I have you do the planning out stage. Because if you plan everything out and get it all worked out like to scale on paper, then you can just kind of cut out or whatever and lay your drawing on your work and then trace it. And so that way you don't, have to, worry about getting everything all, messed up or things like that. If your clay is too wet or things like that, your paper's going to end up kind of sticking to it. And so if it feels like it's absorbing some moisture or whatever, just, let it dry out a little bit more. So at this point, if you're going to be tracing rather than like freehand drawing or whatnot, I like to use a ballpoint pen and then just start tracing over all of the lines. I'm not pressing super duper hard. I guess probably a similar pressure to, what you would write with. Obviously, if you press too hard, you're going to end up kind of going through the paper, which, it's not the end of the world, though it's not overly desirable. Another way that you'll be able to tell if like maybe your slip is still a little bit too wet is it'll kind of be tearing the paper right there. Obviously, we don't want to trace over this with the needle tool. Again, I know that that's something that a lot of people like to gravitate towards because it feels more natural, but that really sharp point is going to end up just tearing through your paper. I'm not doing it right now, but a lot of times I like to use a pen that has like a contrasting color, so that I can make sure, like especially if it's like a black and white drawing, so I can remember where it was that I have already gone over. I'm not actually going to draw those in there because I'm just going to freehand that. So this design that I'm doing is called Vichinaki. I have Polish heritage background. I'm 60%. And Vichinaki is the Polish art of paper cutting. And everything is pretty much symmetrical, and then their subject matter a lot of times is flowers or things found in nature. We see a lot of trees, roosters. Okay, so maybe you want to use your cultural background, or perhaps a culture that you're, interested in, looking at what are their traditional design motifs and how you can perhaps incorporate that into your design. Okay, so once you're done tracing over all of your lines, again, this is only if you don't feel comfortable just, going out and drawing your design on the pot. Now it's the moment of truth. We will carefully peel our paper back. I was feeling that mine was maybe a little bit on the wet side of things. And there we go. I don't know if you can see this, but yeah, I can see how now there's all these sort of little indentations and guidelines so that now you know where you're going to scratch away at. Now comes the fun part, and we're going to start scratching away. And the tools that you use are really going to depend on your specific design and your personal preference, okay? I can't believe, actually, one of the main tools that we use is, it's a little Sgraffito double-ended loop tool. It kind of looks like this. It says Kemper Tools, only it has like really small little loops at both ends. They should be in your green buckets, but then they're also over on the counter as well. If you want larger areas to remove, like if I wanted to remove like a whole lot of the background, I might use one of these larger loop tools. We have some of these tools that have kind of like this little scoop knife. This is probably my favorite tool to use are these, they kind of remind me of like dental tools or whatever, but they're little metal sculpting tools. The reason I like these is because if I want to remove like a large area, I can really kind of put it on its side and remove, you know, quite a bit without digging down into it. But then if I need to get into like a finer, you know, thinner lines, and I can bring it up on a point and just use the tip there. If you want really super fine detail, you could go ahead and, you know, use your needle tool. We do also on the counter have a number of these small loop tools that have different shapes. And then I also have a few of these actual dental tools. My dentist, I asked them, I said, what do you do with those when they're done with them? And they're like, oh, we just throw them away. And I'm like, well, I'll take them. So, and you want to think about, you know, what areas do you want to see that are going to be white? I'm thinking I might remove, let's see, maybe probably like the whole background, right? And so I can kind of come in and start scratching, kind of scraping away. Again, remember, we're not digging down into the clay. And actually, in a perfect world, I would have this be a little bit more dry so that I don't smear. Oops. This is one of my favorite things to do. It's a really satisfying feeling, sort of scratching away that leather hard slip. Gotta get in there. And remember, it doesn't have to be just like all black or all white. You could really kind of come in some areas and maybe do sort of like a hatching technique. You know, maybe where you scratch away a little bit to kind of suggest a different value, sort of like a gray mid-tone. You might need to clean your tool off every once in a while. What you want to do is you want to try to resist like taking your hand and like smearing the crumbs away. Because when that happens, oftentimes what you do is you end up kind of smearing some of that black pigment into the clay, and then it won't look as clean. It won't have that, really stark sort of contrast between the black slip and the white clay. One thing I like to do is I like to grab one of the dry soft bristle brushes and kind of pretend like I'm an archaeologist and like really lightly sort of dust my crumbs away. Okay, you could kind of blow them away a little bit too. Whatever you do, all of these crumbs at the end of the hour or class period, they need to go into the actual garbage can. Throw away, goodbye. We don't want any of the black slip to get into the clay recycle bins, because again, that will end up permanently staining and kind of discoloring the clay that we use. So unfortunately, we just kind of have to take our little crumbs and throw those in the trash. All right, and you just keep on doing this until you have your entire composition scratched away. Once you're pleased with it, obviously make sure that you've signed it, and then we'll put it on the greenware shelf so that it can, you know, fully dry out. You do want to make sure that you're wrapping, like while you're still working on it, make sure that you're wrapping it up overnight with plastic. We don't want it to get too dry. If it gets bone dry when you're doing this, you won't get nice sort of clean removals of the slip. You'll just get like these teeny tiny little dust crumbs. It's potentially that you could, you know, chip or break off a piece of your project, right? And that they can't go on ahead and fix. Now, if it's a little bit still damp, and say you're like, oh man, I accidentally scratched away where I didn't want to, you can kind of come back in with, you know, a small paintbrush or whatever and put a little bit more slip on there if you'd like. Again, really cool sort of graphic technique, all right? And so then after it's been dried and we bisque fire it, then we will put clear glaze on it so that it's waterproof, and it will make it like a really nice, deep, sort of shiny black. All right. If you have any questions or concerns, let me know. Have fun doing Sgraffito.